Braving the Storm. "We're going to be having some very dangerous snowstorms over the next few days," the thing controller said to his engines one morning. "So, that means that Rusty and Fred are now going to be doing non-stop maintenance runs over a period of 3 days, so that everything will still run on schedule. So, do be careful." Then he left. The engines shuddered. "I hope they won't be too bad," said Ivo Hugh hopefully, "because if they were, they would have to close the line." "Right?" The engine smiled weakly. They knew Ivo Hugh was trying to be optimistic, but they couldn't help but think about what was in store for them. The thing controller was right about the storms. They swept across the island with horrifying blows. Fred was having a hard time getting started up. "Come on, old boy," said his driver. "We have to get the lines cleared so the engines can do their work." I'm sorry, sir," Fred stuttered. It's just that... oh, well..." "You're scared, aren't you?" his driver finished. Sir Handel and Duncan laughed. "A diesel afraid of a small snowstorm?" Duncan chuckled. "That's a laugh!" "That's a shame, Fred," Sir Handel said solemnly. "That is a shame." Fred tried to get back at them by reminding how Sir Handel's train got stopped by a snowball and how Duncan snuck out of his shed and did work that he wasn't supposed to do. But they didn't listen, and they kept on teasing him. "Don't listen to them," soothed his driver. "Come on now, we've got work to do." Fred stuttered to life and rattled slowly out of the sheds. Soon, Fred arrived to the work shed, where Rusty was getting fitted with a snowplow. By now, the wind was turning into a gale, and almost instantly, the sky was thick with snowflakes. "Looks like we're gonna have a blizzard," said Fred's driver. "Worse," Mr. Hugh replied. "From the looks of things, it looks like a whiteout." Sure enough, everywhere they looked, they could barely see anything but falling snow. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind swirled around the works, knocking down equipment and other loose things. This made Fred jump. In fact, he shuddered so hard that the workmen were having a hard time trying to put on his snowplow. "Oi! Hold still there!" shouted one. "We need to get this on so that you can keep the lines cleared." "No, I won't," Fred replied over the wind. "Not up there, at least." And with that, he stopped his engine altogether. The workmen tried everything to get him started again, but nothing worked. Finally, they gave up and took Rusty, leaving Fred inside the work shed. The last couple days were not all that pleasing. The engines were having a terrible time. Rusty had it even worse. No sooner did he clear one section of track, it was already covered in snow again, like it hadn't been touched. "This would be so much easier if Fred was here," Rusty said to himself as he was clearing the mountainside line, "instead of being in the work shed cowering. Besides, it's not all that bad, is it?" That's when the trouble began. A loud rumble was heard, and before anybody knew what was happening, a landslide of snow fell on top of them. Nobody answered Rusty's question then. He already knew why. The guard stumbled through the snow towards the nearest signal box. When he arrived at one, he quickly telephoned for help. Mr. Hugh soon got the call. After he hung up the phone, he ran immediately towards the work shed. He and a rescue crew quickly dug out the entrance and flung open the doors and began rummaging through the shed looking for supplies. As they were fitting on the snowplow, Mr. Hugh desperately tried to get Fred started. "I'm not going out there, sir," Fred said defiantly. "I am not going out into that mess." "Oh, yes, you will," Mr. Hugh replied sternly. "Rusty and the workmen are trapped in a landslide. We have to help them." Fred now felt ashamed. Here he was, sitting in a nice, dry, but very stuffy shed, while his fellow Diesel worked himself to the gear to keep the railway alive. "If Rusty has braved this storm these last couple of days," he thought, "why am I sitting here like a dying duck?" Instantly, his engine roared into life. The men whooped with laughter as they quickly boarded the coach, and Fred headed into the storm, smoke pouring from his exhaust pipe. The snow was thick as the wind beat against Fred's train, and the snow stung his eyes. But that didn't stop him. He was determined to rescue the stranded crew. He roared as he plowed through the snow with everything he had, until, at last, he found them. Quickly, the rescue crew and some of the workmen dug the train out. In no time at all, Fred was hooked up to the back of the train, and he pulled them all the way back to the yards. Once they were back inside the work shed, Fred spoke to Rusty as the men warmed themselves up by the fire. "I'm sorry that I chickened out a few days ago," he said. "I was frightened that I might end up like that equipment that fell over that one day." Rusty was quick to forgive him. When the storm was over, Rusty and Fred returned to the sheds to find the engines whistling in welcome and gratitude. The thin controller was there too, and he gave them and the workmen very high praise and thanks. Even Sir Handel and Duncan said they were sorry to Fred about teasing him. Now, Fred is as happy as can be. He's not afraid of bad weather. He now knows that it's just stupid to be cowering about how bad things can get when they will never actually happen.